It's finally here, the Superman review. Now, if you're like me, you always have your ear to the ground when it comes to movie and movie news. Now, it is no secret that somebody broke the cardinal rule and released a review like 8 days ahead of schedule, and it broke the internet simply because of how bad it was. It was bashing the hell out of this movie. There was a limited screening in LA and New York where a handful of people got to see it like 2 weeks prior before everybody else. And this one particular critic did release his review, and it was bad. And it stirred the internet. They ended up pulling it like 5 minutes after that, but the echoes were still there. Like, I still read part of the review online, even though they took it down. I mean, it's the internet, so, you know. Now, again, you might find it weird or strange that I'm talking about somebody else's review in my review. However, I think it's very canon to talk about this because of the impact it had and the ripple effects that it kind of stood out. Because, again, before going and seeing this film, I had to see, like, I just had to read the review. Had to read it. And it makes some valid points. However, I don't necessarily agree with his take. I mean, the points are there. You can't argue that. But you can argue the take. That there's a lot going on in this film. Yes, I mean, there's a lot going on. It's very packed. It's like supreme pizza with stuffed cheese, or with stuffed crust. So to say that it's overstuffed and you don't have enough development, that, again, some people might say it's too much. There's too much going on. I don't get enough time to develop the character. I look at it as, I absolutely loved it. I mean, we get to see Superman interact with Green Lantern. We get Hawkgirl. We have all these characters we know and love, and they're being brought back to the screen in this first film. We even have Krypto. Okay, again, not new. We've seen Krypto in Teen Titans, which just went off the air like last year. There is no need to say, okay, we need an origin story for Superman before we bring any other characters in. We need to really flesh out who Superman is. We had 10 years of Smallville introducing us to who Clark Kent was. Countless decades of who Superman is. I feel like this is the perfect example of the perfect Superman. Complete 180 from Zack Snyder's take on Superman. And I'm not hating on that. I like Zack Snyder's Man of Steel. That adaptation of Superman to me was kind of a shock at first. Like, I was like, that's not Superman. Like, it just wasn't Superman. He took a completely different approach, and it completely changed. Like, James Gunn is going to the roots of who Superman is. This is a Superman movie we've been waiting for since like 2011 when Smallville ended, and you see Tom Welling finally put the suit on and fly into the air. Okay, this is a Superman movie we've been waiting for. David Cornswept is the perfect Superman. He embodies Christopher Reeves and Tom Welling and kind of meshes them both together to give us the perfect adaptation. Because Christopher Reeves is Superman, as Tom Welling is Clark Kent. In the original Superman movies, we get Clark Kent, but really Christopher Reeves strived as Superman. Tom Welling strived as Clark Kent. Like, he is Clark Kent. Cornswept kind of embodies both of those. He takes Christopher Reeves' Superman and Tom Welling's Clark Kent and gives us the perfect performance. Okay, this is the Superman that we've been waiting for, that we need. One of the major issues in the film is that Superman goes to another country to stop a war, which to the U.S. government is an act of like a war crime or whatever you want to call it. I don't want to say it's act of treason, maybe a war crime, because he's acting on behalf of the U.S. government. He's in an interview with Lois Lane on the record saying that, no, I acted on behalf of myself. Okay, I stopped the war and people were going to die, so I did something about it. He said, you try to stop a war? I said, no, I did stop a war, and I stopped people from dying. That is the Clark Kent. That is Clark Kent speaking. Okay, in Man of Steel, when Clark Kent watched his father die and didn't do anything about it, that's not Clark Kent. Like, that was the most disappointing part of that film. I was like, well, how did he let his father die? You know, like, how are you just going to stand there and watch, knowing he could have saved him? That's not Clark Kent. Clark Kent embodies Superman. Like, Clark Kent is we instill who Clark Kent is into Superman, and Superman takes that notion and he goes to stop this war, and that is who Clark Kent is. And I feel like that is the perfect embodiment of who's Tom Welling's Clark Kent was. And Cornerstone even has the closest to being what Christopher Reeve was as Superman with the glide, the way he flies. It is like my old boss, and mentor was a huge Superman fan. Christopher Reeves was his Superman, and he was one that actually turned me into watching Smallville before going to see Man of Steel. And he talked about how Chris Reeves was his Superman, how he loved it as a kid, and how Smallville, like he was skeptical watching it at first, but his son talked him into it, and he ended up loving the show. He said Chris Reeves was a Superman, nobody else compared to him. And I think Cornswept really does embody both Tom Welton and Christopher Reeves and takes and makes a perfect Superman because he plays both Clark Kent and Superman so well. And that's what James Gunn was actually talking about when doing the film. I said he's casting somebody who does this film. There's two characters. There's Clark Kent and there's Superman. They're two separate characters, but both are equally important to the story. And I feel like he definitely accomplished that with this. I want to end my review with this. James Gunn's Superman is not cartoonish. He is the true Superman, the beacon of hope. Now, I'm going to go to say that I think this movie is going to have mixed reviews. You got people who love it and people who hate it. And I think it's going to be very divine because you're going to have that group of audience members who grew up watching Zack Snyder's Superman and who, when their first exposure to Superman was Man of Steel, and they had that darker, grittier Superman. So having this more animated version of Superman, where he's more truer to the comics, I'll say, is going to be a shock to their system because it's not what they're used to. It's not the Superman they know. Personally, I feel like this is kind of a spiritual sequel to Smallville. A lot of our superhero movies need to be dark and gritty. Okay, Superman is the light bringer. Right? He's supposed to be the light bringer, the beacon of hope. And I feel like that is what Superman did, and that's what this film does. It brings light. It's a beacon of hope. So with that being said, I am going to give this film a Ferris Bueller because I definitely am going to go see this again without question. I might have to go see it twice. I might have to go pay to see it twice because that's how great of a movie this is. Wait to hear your guys' thought on the film. Comment below and let me know. And as always, if you like what you see here and you want to see more, click right there to see more.